Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the August Council meeting. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. They hold the memories and tradition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and also a special welcome to our Wodonga adventurers who are joining us today and have just more than doubled the audience, I think, so welcome tonight. Moving on to item 3, apologies and requests for leave of absence. So we've got the Mayor who is an apology. She is away sick. Do I have any other apologies or requests for leave? No, good. On to number 4, declaration under acts, regulation codes or local laws.
Yes, Madam Acting Mayor, I'd like to request the withdrawal of agenda item 8.9, which is in relation to the release of the covenant AC 867-382G from Lot 2 and Lot 3 of PS 741672. It's proposed, subject to your approval, that the above item be deferred, pending a revised report that will come to the September Council meeting.
Councillor Lowe and Councillor Watson, any comments? All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. Declaration of councillors of any conflicts of interest. I know we've got a few tonight. Councillor Mildren, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Item 8.6, item 8.7 and item 8.8.
And Councillor Hall, did you have any?
Yes, I have a conflict on item 8.8.
And there were no conflicts over here. Oh, Councillor Watson?
Thanks, Madam Acting Mayor. I'd just like to read a statement. This would be referring to item 8.11. I'd like the following comments recorded in the minutes, please, Kevin. At the council briefing of the 29th of April, council officers gave a verbal report on the Hills strategy priority list. During this report, mention was made of possible priority items for Huon Hill. As I own a small parcel of land on Huon Hill from which I receive lease payments for the use of telecommunication towers, and without the benefit of a written officer's report, I took the conservative view at the time and declared a conflict of interest in this matter. However, I have given further consideration to this matter and taken advice in relation to it. While each report must be considered on its merits in terms of its impact on the land of Huon Hill, I'm satisfied that on the basis of the current priority action plan for the Wodonga Hills presented in item 8.11 tonight, I do not have a direct or indirect conflict of interest. Therefore, I will not be declaring a conflict of interest for that item.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Now, I've also got a conflict for 17.2, so that will mean we'll have to get someone to fill in for the chair for me just for that item. Do I have any nominations? And do I have a seconder for that one? Councillor Lowe, thank you. Are all those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. On to 6, confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lowe, Councillor Watson. Any comments, Councillor Lowe? No. Any comments? All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. On to 7, delegates report, of which we have none. On to 8, officers reports for determination. 8.1, 2019 general re-evaluation. We've got a recommendation on page 12. Do I have a mover? Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson, over to you.
It's just a process or a procedure that we've got to do to evaluate, to put a valuation on the city city land. So it's one of those processes that need to be done for the city.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe?
No, just to echo Councillor Watson's words, it's just a procedural matter. Thank you.
Any other comments? Over back to you, Councillor Watson, for any other comments? No? Great. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. 8.2, tender for minor and miscellaneous reseal preparation works. And we've got a recommendation on page 19. Do I have a mover? Councillor Hall and Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Hall, over to you.
Look, there's only one tender that came to being, as far as I can see here, and they were awarded, will be awarded the contract. Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell, any comments? No. Any other comments from councillors? Nope. Councillor Hall, anything for close? No. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. 8.3, tender for pavement dig-outs and stabilisation program, 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 25. Do I have a mover? Yes, Councillor Mitchell. And a seconder? Oh, Councillor Watson. Councillor Mitchell, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just really a follow-on from the previous 8.2, and no, it's works that must be carried out. So it's something that just has to be approved. So.
Councillor Watson. No. Any other councillors for comment?
It's probably just worth highlighting this, both 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, which is coming up. All tenderers are local companies that provide jobs locally to the region, so it's an added benefit that we can award these contracts locally.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. No other comments? Councillor Mitchell, back to you for close.
No, I don't need to close. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. Tender for asphalt program 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 32. Do I have a mover? Councillor Watson, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson, over to you.
As with all the other two previous recommendations that came before us, it's to keep our roads and our in a good strong field surface. We awarding this tender to keep the city streets up to standard.
Councillor Lowe.
I'm gathering what Council wants and meant to get out there. It's in maintaining our infrastructure is one of the many jobs that Council do, and maintaining them at a high standard is one thing. So it's ongoing maintenance is part of our ongoing budgeting process. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Any other comments? All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. 8.5, tender for provision of road and line marking services. And the motion is on page 39. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Hall. Councillor Mitchell, over to you.
Thank you. And we're now on the fifth formality that we really need to just get moving, and I recommend that I recommend the motion.
Councillor Hall, any comments? Any other councillors? Councillor Watson.
I did during the briefing sessions ask the question of this line marking services in our city, that would it be more worthwhile for us to purchase a machine and do it ourselves, and it's still very much in the line that it's more beneficial with the budget that we have a tender in and a process through that than owning equipment that would be sitting in our shed while they're not being used. So at this stage, it's still more beneficial to use it by a tender process.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Any other comments? Councillor Mitchell, back to you for close.
I move the motion be put.
All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. 8.6, Community Impact Grants and Community Impact Partnership Grants, July 2019 round. We've got a recommendation on page 44. Do I have a mover? Yes? Or conflict?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Given that the next three items I have conflicts for, how about I do the whole three and stay out? Thank you. I'll read them all. The community grants matter. I'm a board member of the Wodonga Senior Secondary College who have an application for funding, or the students of the college have an application for funding. And I'm also a board member of Mungamarina Aboriginal Corporation who have an indirect relationship with Albury Wodonga Aboriginal Health Service, who also have an application for funding. Maybe remote, but they're nonetheless there. The second one is the Wodonga Planning Scheme Amendment C131. My business provided advice to North East Water in respect to the introduction of environmental significance overlays back in 2014-15. And the other item, 8.8, which is Wodonga Planning Scheme Amendment C128. My business has provided advice in respect to a number of the sites of developments comprised in the multiple site planning scheme amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. Councillors, you've got a recommendation there on page 44. Do I have a mover? Councillor Watson. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Watson, over to you.
The report is before us, the recommendation is definitely before us, and the process of going through the grants and community impact grants is through a committee base, which very good criteria that is followed, and I believe what's the officers and what's been put forward is going to give the right impact for our city.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The two recommendations that we have before us are recommendations that have come back from our executive after the council has asked many questions in relation to them. The answers that the executive came back with were all very satisfactory, and I'm happy to recommend the recommendation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mitchell. Any other comments from councillors? Yes, Councillor Lowe.
I spoke earlier of the many things that council does, and we're talking about infrastructure before, and these community grants is just another one of council's many roles that they play in the community for benefit for some of those in the audience, that we allocate a budget per year to community impact grants and sponsorships. And there's a process that the people that apply and go through and a certain selection criteria, and a lot of that is benefit to Wodonga community. And all these have shown to be of benefit to Wodonga community, so that's what we're voting on tonight, or passing motion on. Thank you.
And I just want to highlight that we've got a recipient of the impact grant. So the Wodonga Scouts received a impact grant at some point recently. So that's our entries in the audience. Back to Councillor Watson for close.
There will be a few people that haven't been successful, and namely one of them might be is that they've been 3 times up and they cannot apply after 3 times, and that's part of our process and part of our process of going through the grants and the partnership grants. However, those people that have missed out, or those groups that have missed out, will certainly get some good feedback from our city of how to go about it in future, or give them direction of where they can get some funding for some of their groups, or how to encourage their own group to build their own ability to budget for it. So there's always winners and there's always a few losers, but unfortunately the ones who have missed out, please don't be respondent of it, and also please let the community know that they're out there, so for other groups may want to apply for them each year.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. On to 8.7, Wodonga Planning Scheme Amendment C131, application to apply environmental significance overlay at Wodonga Water Treatment Plant, Anzac Parade. We've got a recommendation on page 52. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lowe. Councillor Hall. Councillor Lowe, over to you.
I'll reserve my right.
Jolly good. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, this is just a request from me to request from North East Water, is that right? Yeah, for to have a buffer zone around the area that's on the map in our attachment. It's required so any future development, that buffer zone's there, so basically I suppose it wouldn't be able to be developed in that area, any further development, so I think it's a just request and I do support it.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Any other councillors for comment? Councillor Lowe, back to you.
Thank you, Acting Madam Mayor. Probably echo Councillor Hall's words. We've been asked by North East Water to create an environmental significance overlay recorded on there, and it's to protecting their asset from unforeseen circumstances, I suppose is the best way to put it, and there'll be no impact on surrounding areas, maybe to development. That's a little bit of a restriction that may be put on there, but in general, we need to protect our main water asset of the area. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. All those in favour? All those against? And the motion is carried. Moving on to 8.8, Wodonga Planning Scheme Amendment C128, correction to Wodonga Planning Scheme, mapping and ordinance irregularities and anomalies. Read yours out, Councillor Hall.
Yes, I've got a conflict of interest. My daughter, it's an indirect conflict of interest. My daughter has land, property near the rezoning of land, one parcel of land that is in the planning scheme.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. And do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Watson. Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Watson, to you.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. This is when we build estates and things like that, there comes a time where we need to do correction and anomalies that have come up. And this is just one of those periods of changing some of the things. We'll always be having these anomalies coming through. any irregularities of our planning and mapping. So once again, we're just asking the Minister for Planning to prepare amendment.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Councillor Watson said, there are over time a number of irregularities that arise in planning and developments, etc., and a clean-up is required every once in a while, and that's what this is all about. It's going through and fixing up all the little things that aren't quite right, and then everything moves along nicely. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Probably just to highlight for some of the people in the audience, an example of that is there's a current zoning on a particular piece of land which is zoned as residential land, but it's being used as a public park, and so it's just changing the zoning from being residential to what it's actually being used as, and it's being used as a public park. So that's just to highlight one example, that reason for these changes. They're kind of immaterial, really.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. And just another point that I wanted to make is that all the owners who are affected for this will have an opportunity to have their feedback, and it is policy neutral, which I have discovered means the policy doesn't change. It's a fancy word for saying that. Councillor Watson, anything for close? No. All those in favour? Yes, the motion is carried unanimously. If we could bring Councillor Hall back in. And Councillor Mildren. You can come back to it. Yep. So we have removed 8.9, so we are moving on to 8.10, Gateway Island Master Plan, Priority Setting Table, Project Implementation. And there's a recommendation on page 69. Do I have a mover?
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I move that the motion comprise item 1 and 4 only in the recommendation.
Do I have a seconder for that one?
I'll second it for debate purposes.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. Although I know this is going nowhere, I find this really difficult to come to terms with because this is nebulous. There is no clear, concise information as to exactly what we're doing with this money. Some of it, you've got a better idea than other components of it. And I know we will be fed the information or fed the line that, oh, but you can't go off and do this stuff if you don't get a council resolution. Well, we've got a resolution that put in place the Gateway Plan. It's put in place a series of priorities, and basically that is, and we've got a global budget allocation. That should be adequate to go off and do the groundwork that's necessary to come back to the council with detailed costing and which projects are available and able to be done within the available resources that we've allocated in the budget. This notion of going off and doing it in a manner that this is, where it's pretty nebulous and we're not even sure which tracks are going to be done, for example, or what other issues are going to be dealt with specifically. If a punter came up to me in the street and asked me exactly what the money was being spent on, for the most part, I couldn't tell them. So I think it's remiss and somewhat irresponsible of council to be actually approving to do what's recommended in this document. Hence the reason I move the motion that allows the global amount to be, of last year's unspent money, to be rolled over in a global amount, and that the council continue to pursue grants, but the rest of it I'll leave out. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Hall? No? Any other councillors like to speak to that one? Councillor Watson?
I will actually speak against the motion. is that the recommendation before us, I would, if this fails to get up this recommendation that Councillor Mildren's put up, is that I would put the motion that is before us, because item 3 on the recommendation, once the project's been fully investigated and scoped, they'll be brought back to council for assessment, so they're always going to be brought back to us.
Councillor Lowe, any comments?
Yeah, probably just echo Councillor Watson's words and more around the fact that we kind of have a no surprise rule at council, and maybe if I had more time to think about Councillor Mildren's motion before now, that I may have come up with a different conclusion. But at the moment, I agree with Councillor Watson and that the projects that get identified by council staff have to come back for council assessment then. So I'll be voting against Councillor Mildren's motion tonight.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be voting for it, and the reason for that is if you look at item 2, it clearly states that the project list as set out within this report be approved as the works program for 2019-20. And then in item 4, it goes on that council officers will continue to plan for future infrastructure projects. So it's a complete conflict of, a complete conflict, 2 and 4. So it doesn't make sense. Now, either we're going to approve or we're not going to approve. So I think we need to be very clear on that.
Okay, and Councillor Hall, you didn't want to make any comment, did you say? No? So Councillor Mildren, back to you. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. In terms of the no surprises, I've foreshadowed this as an issue right through the process of these reports being prepared. I probably wouldn't have raised it as a motion had there not been silence around the table. But this is the motion that I think should be getting up. That's the first bit. And the second bit is why do we, if this is coming back to the council and the council's making a complete decision again on these issues, why is it here? Why is it here today if that's the case? There has to be some outcome that's out of this resolution or the proposal in the recommendation that is actually of substance, that doesn't get brought back to be actually revisited and reconsidered and redetermined at some later date when there's additional or other information. So fundamentally, there's just no point to this, the rest of this bit. That's why 1 and 4 is acceptable and the rest of it's not. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. So we'll go to vote with Councillor Mildren's motion. So all those in favour and all those against? So I will do casting. Yes, so I'm voting against. So the motion is lost. So Councillor Lowe, to you for your foreshadowing motion.
I'll move the motion as listed on page 69 as the recommendation reads there.
Thanks,
I won't
Councillor.
read it out.
Yes, sure. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe, over to you.
Whilst I don't necessarily disagree with what some colleagues have said, the master plan is a broad master plan that is a 30, 40, 50-year master plan, and we need to give council staff some direction on what is next for their planning. And I think this is just an ask to go out and direct and identify immediate things as opposed to being such a broad program to help. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say here. Help give us direction on what is their priorities in this master plan. Thank you.
Councillor Watson, any comments?
I believe point 3 is when they have investigated and scoped and worked up a budget for it to bring it back for our decision, it might mean that not the full content of the works need to be, could be done because of costings, and therefore that's the reason it would come back for us to make an opinion on.
Any other comments? For people who have the agenda in front of them, there is some details about what this involves on page 64, 65, 66 and 67. Like, for example, we do talk about boardwalks. It doesn't say exactly where, but we do talk about boardwalks and estimated cost and a proposed implementation timeline. I know there are about 132 different projects in this, so a lot to get exact information on, too much to get exact information on, and everything's going to come back up to us anyway. Councillor Lowe, to you for close.
Nothing to close.
All those in favour? All those against? So I'll use my casting vote in favour. Moving on to 8.11, planning for the Wodonga Hills Priority Action Plan Project Implementation. Do I have a mover? Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Acting Madam Mayor. I'd like to propose a motion to move here. And I'll read it out if that's okay.
Yep.
Number one, that remaining unspent funds, approximately $211,000 from the 18-19 at Ledger 67110, Hilltop Strategy and Implementation, be rebudgeted into 2019 and 20. Number two, the combined allocated funding of approximately $311,000 be made available to implement. 2A, priority action items, Action 1 and Action 4, as determined by the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group, are set out in their interim report dated May 2019. And 2B, the design and completion of the Clings Hill Climb Track, Priority Action 14 for the Clings Hill thing. Number 3, once detailed, design for Action 4 and part of Action 14 have been undertaken, that all necessary approvals be applied for and received, and that any agreements required with Parklands Albury Wodonga or the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning be negotiated and entered into before any works are put in hand. Once works are ready to commence with Action 4 and 14 items, a detailed community information plan be assembled and put to the local community and interested parties, and 5 works be completed by 30th of June 2020.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Do I have a seconder for that one? Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe, over to you.
I'll put this, I suppose you could call it an amended motion or recommendation, using the recommendation from the staff, and slightly amended this, councillors, just in seeking your support that we've identified as one of the priority action plans to locate a car park for safety somewhere within the vicinity of Clings Hill. Where that ends up and where it be is yet to be determined, but we have a rough locale of it, and rightly so, we should be doing this for safety concerns. And while we're doing this, I thought the completion of the Clings Hill Climb Track under that same proviso of safety, we have inexperienced riders up there riding up the downhill track, just due to not knowing where to go or bike etiquette just yet, and that just comes from inexperience. if we're going to be building a car park to help facilitate these walkers and riders and mountain bikers into this locale, then I think we should make it easier for them to use the area as best we can, and that includes some wayfinding and track signage there as well. That's why I've slightly amended the motion, because you know, we want to build a safe environment. We've got men, women and children using this area in great numbers. You only got to take a trip down to there to any one of the weekends or a Wednesday, Thursday night, and those car parks are at capacity. And if we can help facilitate an emerging sport, then even better. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson?
Thanks, Acting Deputy Mayor. The beauty about, I suppose, the amendment to the recommendation is that it will be coming back to Council for clarification and signing off, which is point 4 of the new proposed motion. But I think it's also very important to highlight that point 3 is that the necessary approvals are applied for and received, and I think that's a very important aspect of it, so that it is done with all transparency during the design and build, or for the design and build.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Any other councillors for? Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to read a statement in regards to the Wodonga Hills overall. And in that statement, I would like to say that in 2016, as a candidate in the Wodonga Council elections, I placed a statement regarding Wodonga Hills on my website. A similar statement has also resided on my Councillor Brian Mitchell Facebook page since November 2017. It speaks of a soon-to-be lost treasure being the remaining least untouched hills surrounding Wodonga, caused through the preconceived narrow-mindedness, and it mourns the death of fauna and their habitat, as well as destruction of the unique flora, and decries the scarring of the hills, as well as our future generations' collective conscience. Further to this statement, I add that making of avenues allowing for the creation of challenging tracks for wayward four-wheel drivers, as well as an expanding repository for illegal household rubbish, industrial rubbish, belies common sense. Add to this scenario the often burnt out stolen car and the hint of a possible commercial opportunity, sounds the alarm that none of this should ever be allowed to take hold in the formulation of such a strategy. All future planning should also, by nature, prevent these possibilities. Just like Huon Hill has already shown us, we are now moving to complete this frightful cycle by incorporating all our hills into a similar downward spiral. Who cares? Well, I care. I know that my vote tonight against the recommendation will count for naught. I'm only now in my 7th month as a councillor, and all the decisions leading up to this moment were made prior to my election in a count-back success in January this year. Since then, I've been very clear that I disagree with the way the Wodonga Hills strategy was conceived and is now being actioned. In closing, I will say that my conscience is clear. I've not been involved in any of these decision-making processes or what I might consider compromised rationale. Regretfully, my perceived loss is greater than anyone can know. Madam Chair, I would ask that what I've just stated be recorded in the minutes of tonight's meeting.
Sure. Other councillors? Councillor Hall.
Upon this motion, if it doesn't get up, I would like to put another motion.
Sure.
But having said that, I would like to just speak to this. Okay, 2 times a motion for an independent, unbiased review of the Wodonga Hills has been put up to council. Both times the vote went 3-3, the chair using the casting vote not to support, I believe, a fair and just option for all the community. Now is the time to act for all community and not just for a selected group. If we are to be taken seriously as a transparent and consultative council, then an independent review is the only way forward, fair way forward. The Wodonga Hills, I believe, has been an agenda-ridden project since its inception. I don't believe this is fair to all of those who want their voices heard too. I note that all the actions listed are in the Hunchback Clings Hill area. Why are there no actions on any other hill, you might like to ask? It's time this changes. The purpose of the car park, the proposed car park put forward tonight is to provide 48 car parking spaces. This would obviously cater for a reasonable size events in this area. It is to be in a nature conservation area, which is already under pressure environmentally. Rectification works on Hunchback Hill are still to be completed from illegal works identified in the Parklands Albury-Wodonga audit report. And to that, this car park is not on council land. Hunchback Hill and the Crown land was taken out of the Wodonga Hills strategy for a reason. It now seems it's made its way back in. Was this always how it was going to be? You might ask yourself that question as well. I believe to have a car park of this size on this land could be considered irresponsible in considering that there is lead contamination on the site. It also could lead to more burnt out cars and therefore a greater risk of bushfires in what is already a very high bushfire risk area. Much of this sort of behaviour happens at night and in the early hours of the morning when there is no one around, and who would police this? A car park would not discourage this, but in fact could possibly encourage more of this behaviour. The only fair and transparent way forward for this is an independent, unbiased investigation and assessment to be completed and a report to come back to council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mildren.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. For those who are interested, you might notice I'm wearing a green tie tonight, and that's reflective of where I see all the issues with the mountain bike strategy and everything else that goes with the motion that's before us. This motion assumes that the global budget is sufficient for the project that the staff have put forward to be done, as well as completion of a significant mountain bike track. In response to Councillor Watson's comment about item 4 does not bring the matter back to council for further decision making. Item 4 just says get on with it, really, and go out and tell the community what we're doing, which again is potentially in contradiction to the matters that arise in another agenda item later on that our CEO's put forward in relation to communications. There are so many things about this. We're talking about potentially spending council money on Crown land that we aren't even the Committee of Management over, or is that something that comes out of this proposition where it says that we're going to do collaborative land management? Is that code for we're going to take over the Crown land by stealth? I don't know what the answer to that is, but the plans as they've been put before us at the moment, which is what the resolution will approve, and for somebody to come back and say, oh, but we'll just adjust that later, is contrary to the council resolution. If we make a resolution that says what's been put before us is approved, then that's what should be dealt with and done by the staff. They have an obligation to do those things. So we can't say, oh, well, we'll just adjust it later. That just should never apply. So it looks like we're proposing to take some level of control or influence or something over Crown land, because part of this car park appears to be on Crown land. The next bit, there's some of the tracks and probably a fair portion of the track that's being contemplated to be completed didn't have appropriate approvals in the first place, at least part of it didn't. And even though the independent review and relevant documents that were undertaken in part of that review process by DELP and others and Parklands, even though those reports identified matters that required permits that didn't have them, they still don't have permits, yet things are being proposed to continue. So there's something a bit amiss there too. If an average person in the street chose to try and do something without permits that required a permit, we as council would most probably be on them pretty quick. There's so many other things, like again, some of the proposals that are shaking out of this document aren't sufficiently detailed enough to know exactly what it is that's being done, apart from perhaps the one with the intersection work where our staff have given us an impression of what's going to be built, which is probably adequate in terms of what is proposed. I don't agree that it's adequate in terms of how far it's gone because part of it's on Crown land and so on. But apart from that, we don't really have detail of what's being proposed. We don't know where the track and wayfinding is going to be done. We don't know what the budget amount for it's likely to be. And there's a whole range of things like that that will be told, oh yeah, well, they'll be brought back or they'll be investigated. Well, this motion is, again, putting things in place without the relevant detailed information. And finally, in terms of green credentials, this is where the acid test falls. This is where the rubber hits the road. And each of our councillors around this table who claim to have green credentials or support the green movement or support the idea of having environmental conscience, this is where it happens. And there's a whole bunch of stuff to do with the area of Hunchback and Clings that this is where it really comes to be told. So I'm not going to support the motion on the basis of all those things. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Mildren. I just wanted to, first of all, before I get into some questions, just clarify a point Councillor Hall made. You mentioned that everything seemed to be about Clings Hill and there wasn't mention about the other hills. Was that what you said?
What I'd said was there seems all the actions are based up in the Clings Hunchback area and there isn't anything for the, this recommendation in the actions for like Hewan or McFarlane.
So Councillor Lowe, can I just clarify on that point? Your recommendation also includes so that everything on page 72 in terms of Clings Hill, all the hills, all the hills, all the hills, all the hills, all the hills. That's still the same, isn't it? So all of those would still be happening. That happens to all the other hills?
That's correct, Madam Mayor. Yep.
So just to clarify, it's not just about Clings Hill, it's about most of the priorities are actually related to all of the hills. Yep.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a question, I'm not sure who to answer it, but it's on the basis that I understood from John Watson's statement before that there is nothing in this report that's impacting on Hewans Hill. And I tend to think that it's either impacting on Hewans Hill or it isn't, or it's impacting on other hills or it isn't. I don't think we can have it both ways. There's something.
Okay. So my question again, so Councillor Lowe, your recommendations includes everything on page 72 and 73 with, it says overall. Okay.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep. Overall. Yep.
Yep. So maybe the comment about Hewan Hill wasn't quite correct?
I'm not sure what Councillor Mildren's point is about Huon Hill.
No, I understand what you mean, Councillor Mildred. So I think Councillor Watson made a comment about this doesn't impact Huon Hill. Was that what you heard, Councillor Mildred? Councillor Watson, did you make a comment about?
I think it was about this is an overall overarching strategy that goes over everything. So,
okay,
so it's going to touch base with a lot of people that live on hills and are associated with hills. That's the environment that we live in. We're all somewhat near a hill, but this is an overall subject.
Okay. Councillor Mildred. Yeah, I'll just, sorry, Councillor Mildred, I'll just go to you.
Madam Mayor, we can't have it both ways. It's as simple as that. There either is matters associated with the property that Councillor Watson made reference to, or there isn't. It can't be both ways.
I might just grab
Councillor
some
Mildred
advice from,
Councillor Mildred can't make a call on conflict on somebody else.
Madam Mayor, I'm not making a call on conflict. I'm making a call specifically on the matters that relate to this issue. Whether or not it's in or out is a specific thing.
you're
Correct.
telling me
It's
it's
in.
in? It's in. So that's what we're voting on, that it's in. Okay. Councillor Mitchell, did you have something?
When we're talking about overall all hills, I don't see that here. I see the design and completion of the Clings Hill climb track, priority action 14, Clings Hill. And they also speak about 1 and 4, which we know about, which is a generalisation, but primarily Clings Hill and a few other little spots where there's signage going. So I don't see in this motion all hills. I see Clings Hill and not much more.
Okay. This is getting a bit confusing for me, so I'm just going to seek some clarity maybe through our CEO, maybe to Leon. Could you just help clarify so we all know what we're actually voting on here? And then I'll come to you, Councillor Lowe.
Madam Acting Mayor, I'd really like to know what the question is, but let me try and provide some clarity on this report. This report, as written, deals with 2 of the 8 highest priority projects that have been identified within the Wodonga Hills strategy. And I might add, it's not a mountain biking strategy, it's a hills strategy. And also, it talks of the 8 number 1 priorities. This report in front of the councillors deals with only the first 2 items, first 2 highest priority items or priority 1 projects. One is the collaborative land management as defined within the Hill strategy and in the approved priority plan. And the second option, or the second priority, or the second item deals with the intersection improvements, which includes a car park on Filton Creek Road. The additional motion that Councillor Lowe has put to us is coincidentally also on Clings Hill, Madam Acting Mayor, and that talks to the climb track to link to Rock and Roll.
Okay. So where am I? I think I'm still on me talking at the moment. Officer Schultz, I just had some other questions as well. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the recent audit that happened? Can you talk about who did that? Was that independent, and what did they find from that, the recent audit by DELP?
Madam Acting Mayor, I'm probably not best placed to talk about that particular audit. I know that it was an independent audit that was arranged through Parklands Wodonga and presented to DELP. DELP have since set up a reference group. DELP have since set up a reference group. There have been, I think, 2 or 3 meetings. I was not able to attend the last one. There is one coming up, I think, on the 2nd of September. But I'm probably not at liberty to discuss much of the details at this time.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify if it was independent, and you've said it's independent.
I believe it was an independent assessment that was done.
Right. And another question, I think, to Officer Schultz, in terms of this motion that Councillor Lowe has put forward, what are the budget implications for this one?
Madam Acting Mayor, when these tracks and trails were originally assessed and some initial design work done and some concepts attached to that, the estimated cost of the climb track was in the order of $22 to $30 per metre. They're talking about a 3-kilometre climb, around about $100,000 there or thereabouts, and that is largely dependent on any conditions that are placed upon any planning permits or any work that's required in addition to the construction work. But about $120,000 would probably see us being able to construct the climb track. And the remaining funds, if so resolved by the council, would be used to construct a safe location where vehicles are able to park on Filter Creek Road.
Thank you, Officer Schultz. I have been to that car park, or the temporary one that's set up there, multiple times, so through the day, after hours and during the weekend. And I don't know what all the people who are parking their car there are doing, but it's always really well utilised, but it is quite hard to reverse. It's a really tight angle there. So for me, there's a lot to consider here, but certainly safety is one of the paramount ones that I'm putting the most weight on here, in terms of not only the people who are using that car park, but people who are going up and down those tracks. And my second biggest consideration is budget. So thank you for clarifying that budget question. Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I just heard Officer Schultz say that the track would be done first, and if there was enough money left, the car park would be done. That's what it sounded like. Is that correct?
Officer Schultz.
Councillor Mildred, through you, Madam Acting Chair, the car park, the plans that have been, the concept plans that have been included within the agenda show a car park of about 48 car parking spaces. That's probably about what we would like to construct, although there's no science behind that particular car parking number. What I'm suggesting that if the councillors did resolve to build the uphill track, the size and the configuration of the car park could be modified slightly to match the budget if that was deemed considered, but it wouldn't be a significant downsizing of the car park. We reckon car parking prices in this location about $3,000 per car parking space. In this particular case, we've estimated about $150,000 thereabouts for the car park itself. There will be some additional funding available, perhaps to enhance, maybe consider some solar lighting, perhaps consider some landscaping and picnic areas, provided, of course, Madam Acting Mayor, that the agreement is reached with DELP to allow that construction to occur in that location and to that extent.
Just trying to clarify, if that's how the budget, so based on that, there's a fairly significant circa 100 to 150,000 surplus amount that's included in the original recommendation. That original recommendation had circa $150,000 in excess to what was required to deal with the matters that are raised in 1 and 4. That's what I'm hearing.
Again, Councillor Mildred, it depends on the additional enhancements we place within the location. It also depends on whether there is a possible purchase agreement or a leasing arrangement that needs to go in with DELP or the landowner. So the costs of about $275, whatever was in the report, that was really a worst case scenario cost, which dealt with car parking enhancements and any other works that may be required in relation to acquiring land or leasing or licensing the land. Just that work hasn't commenced at this time.
Sorry, just to follow that up. So that, if I'm hearing and understanding this correct, that means we really don't know exactly what we're passing in this resolution in terms of what the money's going to be spent on.
What we're doing is undertaking works that have been approved within the strategy and works that have been prioritised by the Wodonga Hills Advisory Group. That's what we're undertaking at this time.
Low, back to you.
Yeah, thank you for everyone's discussion. Probably just some clarity and for Councillor Mildred, made an error in the sense that I was talking about trail and wayfinding, which covers all the hills, which I haven't articulated properly in my motion, so I take that on board. And we covered off, one of my questions was going to be to you, Officer Schultz, about whether this would be possible within budget, understanding it's a bit of a piece of string thing that none of it's been costed as yet. But you've covered off on that. And Councillor Hall was talking about reports and reviews and things, and sometimes not getting the answer that you want to hear doesn't mean it hasn't been done. We've seen the independent reports handed down, and there's action happening on them. So reports are there to read. And I acknowledge there's been some vandalism in certain areas around Wodonga, and I'm appalled by this as any other councillor that's sitting up here. But unfortunately, we can't, we make laws against stupidity, but sometimes people are just stupid. And unfortunately, we've got to do our best to restrict that. But, you know, there's lots of people that want to be stupid, and they'll be stupid anywhere. It doesn't matter what we put where, people are going to be stupid. So it's happening there already. But with the more people that are going there, the less it will happen. So it's just the way it is. It'll be policed by sheer weight of numbers of people being there. So hopefully, the more people that we have there, the less likelihood any damage will happen. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. So we've got Councillor Lowe's motion in front of us that we're voting on. So all those in favour? All those against? So, and I'll use my casting vote in favour. So division? So all those in favour, Councillor Lowe, Councillor Watson, Councillor Bennett, all those against, Councillor Mildren, Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Hall. And I'm the casting vote. The motion is carried. Moving on to officers' reports for noting. 9.1, introduction of community forums. That's just to be noted. Councillor Watson.
Thanks, Acting Madam Mayor. The introduction of these community forums, I believe, is a great way of bringing positive feedback to our community. And an example just over this current weekend, that I was walking with friends in my neighbourhood, and they asked, how do I go about...
Sorry, Councillor Watson, it actually does have a recommendation. It's not for noting. We do actually vote on this one. So I'm assuming, would you also be happy to move that one?
Move it.
Sorry about that. And can we get a seconder for that one? Councillor Lowe. Councillor Watson, back to you. Sorry about that.
Well, I'll do a retake. So I'm more than very happy to move this recommendation for the community forums, and that over the weekend I was walking with friends, and they saw a need for another footpath that will make ease of walking, and I believe these forums will be able to bring those sorts of issues to us as councillors and to the council, in a great way of how to go about things and how to put things into a budget process. So, and one of the forums would be around the budget as well. So I think it's a very good initiative to put into the council.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. Councillor Lowe?
Yeah, I echo Councillor Watson's thoughts, and I think it's a great initiative by us to give some consistency. I think one of the important things about this forum is it's held on the first Monday of the month, 5 or 6 times a year. So people know where to go when they've got not just positive, it could be negative feedback, and generally negative feedback is constructive. So not all negative feedback is purely based out of negativity. Sometimes it's just way we can improve and do things better, and it gives community an option to pass their views forward to us councillors and council in general, and gives them a forum to speak in. I've read recently the Ratepayers Association was struggling to get numbers, and this might be a way of them coming together, and this might be their new nightly meet at these community forums, and then they can hear firsthand from all councillors in an environment where they get to ask questions as well. So I fully support this motion.
Thanks, Councillor Lowe. Any other councillors for comment? Councillor Mildren?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To be technically correct, this is an initiative of the CEO as distinct from us. And I think it's a pretty good initiative, and I think it's something we probably could have been doing a long time ago. It introduces some opportunities for more genuine and open consultation. It doesn't guarantee that that's what will happen, but it gives opportunities for that to happen. It provides scope for the community to contribute, as Councillor Watson has said, to budgetary considerations and a whole range of things. I think this is a step in the right direction to try and get some level of increased transparency and possibly an increased level of accountability for us as councillors and the staff. And I think the CEO's done a pretty good job in the way it's been structured and put together. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Any other councillors for comment? Councillor Hall?
Excuse me. Yeah, I think it's a good initiative, by the CEO. I'm always been really open to having more community consultation. I think if we don't consult, then, what are we being here, as councillors? But the fact is too, I also, we have consulted in the past and, do we take on board everything, I suppose it's impossible to take everything on board, but we really do need to make sure we listen and assess it in an unbiased, open community way. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Hall. Councillor Mitchell, any comments? I just wanted to quickly say, so we'll still be doing all the other range of engagement and consultation that we normally do. This is just adding on to that. And so our CEO approached us with this. This was in relation to, so every year we're part of the community satisfaction survey, and we normally score quite highly in this, above state average. And in the last one, it took a bit of a hit in terms of consultation. So the CEO came up with this as a good idea. There's lots of other councils who do this as well, so we haven't just come up with this model ourselves. We've looked at what works for other councils, and we'll never be able to please everyone. But I think it's fantastic to have as many different ways of this as possible for our community to engage with us. We did a process like this at our last budget, and although I'm not sure how many people we had there, it was really good to have all of the councillors there and have a really good dialogue. So this is great, and it's just another way to get in contact with us. Councillor Watson, back to you for close.
I acknowledge the comments that Councillor Mildren has said, that he's been a good and positive involvement with the CEO to bring this paper to us. But I also would really encourage, in recent weeks, we as councillors go out to our schools, our community, and that is also a good opportunity to get, and such as the Scouts and Guides are here tonight in the audience, is to get all those sorts of groups that use our community, use our resources, use our assets to come along to these things, because, they have some great ideas out there and they're going to be our future leaders. So for those to come along to those forums as well.
Thanks, Councillor Watson. So all those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. So now on to the reports for information. We've got the planning report, 10.1, just for information only. Moving on to the building report, 10.2. On to the competitive services report, 10.3. And I just had a question for Officer Mudra. On page 92, we've got demolition works for the removal of the Wodonga Library. So this is one of our pretty much the next biggest infrastructure project. Could you give us a bit of details about when this is happening and some information about our temporary library that we'll have up?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Acting Mayor. So the demolition tender has been awarded and we're looking at commencing work on November this year. And we would like to have the whole site demolished before Christmas, with construction starting in January, just after Christmas. So we'll be looking at moving our library to a temporary location in October, November, and that will be in High Street. So where the current customer service is at the moment, we'll be reusing that space as well as the old sports store next to it. And so from October, November, we'll be moving the library over and have it operational sometime in November. But we'll keep our patrons notified of the progress with that. But that's the timeline as it stands now.
Great. And is story time still happening?
Story time is indeed still happening.
The other comment I wanted to make is also on that page, we've got supply wheelchair accessible barbecue units. So we actually do have one of them in place at Lesstone Park. And this is looking at having another 10, which will be really fantastic. And of course, we want all our parks to be accessible and we want everyone to be able to use them. So this is fantastic to see that in there as well. 10.4, Assemblies of Councillors. Councillor Hall.
Yeah, I just made note today, generally with our assemblies of, how we list our assemblies of council, we do take note of apologies. And whilst the particular, say, councillor is not listed here, we usually list that they're an apology and it hasn't been listed in these documents. I've been assured that the next documents that come to the next council meeting, they will be listed.
Sorry, thanks, Councillor Hall. Sorry. 10.5. Need some elevator music. 10.5, decisions register. No comments. On to 11. Did you say something, Councillor Watson? No. On to 11, notice of motion, which there is none. Petitions, which we have none. Council seal, we have none. General business. Oh, sorry. So this is actually a new thing that we have in our agenda here, general business. Does anyone have anything they would like to add for this point? Councillor Watson.
Madam Mayor, Acting Mayor, I believe this is a great inclusion in our monthly meetings, our reporting. And tonight I'd like to, under point D, which is tributes, is to make aware that I went to the Murray Valley Centre's 60th dinner in Anna Speedy's absence. The Murray Valley Centre has been in our city for 60 years dealing with disabilities, which is an amazing feat. And David Martin and all his team and his volunteers have been running it for a long, long time. That's been a great asset to our city. But more importantly, that the Ramey Command Logistics have been very much involved from the very first day, because they actually, I think, they gave some land to the Murray Valley Centre to start building an establishment there. And it's still going after 60 years, well before people started thinking about, I think, in our city, about looking after people with disability. So they have those regular things called the bingo nights. I think you'll probably all be very aware as one of their ways of raising funds, and they've been continuing on year after year. But it was a fantastic night to recognise the Murray Valley Centre in Wodonga, 60 years servicing our community and our city. And I really thank everyone who attended that night and all the volunteers and everyone. So a great thing for our city, and it was a pleasure to attend.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Were there any other comments in general business? Councillor Mildred.
Thank you, Madam Acting Mayor. I would just like to say well done to you tonight. I know you went into this meeting very nervous, and I know that you were concerned at how things might unfold, and I don't necessarily agree with the way you voted on all sorts of things, but I do congratulate you and thank you on the way you conducted the meeting tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Mildren. I just wanted to make mention of one event that most of us actually went to, which was the Red Carpet Youth Awards. So it's now in its 11th or 11th year. And a fantastic showcase of what our young people are doing and achieving and the hard work that they're putting in. Sometimes I think young people, you know, portrayed a certain way in the media, but certainly seeing all those amazing young people and what they're achieving in Wodonga was really fantastic. So we had, I think there were maybe 11 or 12 awards. And we also had a group of young people, a committee of young people actually organise all of that. So fantastic to see these young people who are organising a massive event and who are interviewing and these amazing skills that quite often, you know, you wouldn't get involved in, maybe not even ever. And our young people are already using those really amazing skills that I'm sure will serve them really well when they're trying to get jobs and on their resume and looking for those skills. So well done to all those nominated and all the finalists and all of our winners. No other comments for general business? Moving on to 15, urgent business, which there is none. Moving on to question time. No, which we don't have any questions, okay. So moving into, we've got a few items on our confidential business. What part? Do I have to close this first? Or no? Yes, okay. So the recommendation here we've got on page 111, and that is that the meeting be closed for members of the public in order to consider matters pursuant to section 89 of the Local Government Act. Do I have a mover? Councillor Mildren, and seconded by Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Mildren, any comments? All those in favour? And the motion is carried. Oh, sorry, Libby, did you put your hand up, Libby?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, cool. So the motion is carried unanimously. So we will now, we're So we're just going to return to open council meeting. We've got a recommendation on page 125. Can I get a mover for that one? Councillor Watson and a seconder. Councillor Lowe, all those in favour? The motion is carried unanimously. And the next one is to adopt the in-camera recommendations. So the recommendation of the closed meeting of the council be adopted. Do I have a mover for that one? Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Hall, Councillor Mitchell, any comments? Any other comments from councillors? Good. All those in favour? And the motion is carried unanimously. So now I will officially close the meeting and close off the live stream. Our next council meeting is 6 o'clock on Monday, September the 17th. Thanks for attending. The 16th.